But before starting, like always, क्या करना होता है audience को?
इस वीडियो को लाइक करना, अपने दोस्तों में शेयर करना, इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना। हमने मेंबरशिप्स लॉन्च करी हैं, उसको जाके आप चेकआउट करिए। और हमारा जो फ्री टेलीग्राम ग्रुप चैट है उसको हम लोग कमेंट से पिन कर देंगे, वहां जाके दोस्त बनाइए और उनसे बातें करिए।
तो भाई, without any further ado, sit back, enjoy this amazing podcast. The next segment that I want to discuss with you, perhaps the last segment of the podcast, and I want this to be a bit experimental also to a certain extent because we have not covered this before on the channel and I'm looking to see how people respond to it. We'll talk about AI, but before that, fantasy apps that are the new norm these days. What do you think data can help those who want to indulge in this with exactly? Because if data can predict so much, shouldn't people who actively engage in fantasy apps perhaps make a career out of it, be actively using and utilizing data analysts and their insights?
Statistically speaking, you should quit fantasy because there's no chance, right? So I was looking at a stat in Dream 11, amongst all the users, 99% of the users have lost money.
Is this worse than the stock market?
Yes, probably yes. 99. So I think if I'm not wrong, maybe 1.2% winners overall, right? So this is considering. So statistically, fantasy is a very bad game to play, but still people choose to play because it's more like a hope game that you are playing. It's more like a IAS, IIT, JEE kind of thing, right? So hoping that you will also get it, hoping you will also crack it, right? So first take is you have to quit fantasy if you are going statistically, right? So now you have decided to fantasy no matter what, forget all the data, forget all the money. Now, actually in cricket.com, so I did a project called Fantasy Center. It's a 1 year long project. So the logic that I've built, the center that I've built, it is still there. Even after 5 years, it is still there. So that means we've put a lot of effort in building that fantasy center, right? Now, for fantasy player, the biggest pain point is the research and the time to create his team is typically 45 minutes. So on an average, so he has to read articles, go through game analysis, who are the players, right? If he's a serious fantasy player. If he's a casual fantasy player, everyone comes in, puts the money, makes a team then and there, right? If you're a serious fantasy player, average time is around 30 to 45 minutes. So what we wanted is we wanted to reduce that 45 minutes to 5 minutes. You can have all the data at one place because the problem is if let's say CricBuzz, right? So CricBuzz only has stats about career stats, recent matches, that and all. But you will get nothing about fantasy, right? So there is no tool to understand the fantasy metrics. How many times did he come in dream team? How many fantasy points did he get in the last match? Is he a good fantasy? Is he a good cricketer? I have an answer. But is he a good fantasy cricketer? I don't have an answer. Is Virat Kohli a good fantasy pick? I don't have an answer from CricBuzz.
That's very interesting. Could you elaborate on that? That's a very interesting point.
See, for example, let's take Virat only, for example, right? Now, so Virat is usually a safe player again, right? So he's not outrageous, doesn't play at a 200 strike rate. He plays at 120s, sometimes 140s as well. From a fantasy point of view, everyone picks Virat because they're just fans of Virat or they just love Virat, right? But objectively speaking, he is actually not a great fantasy choice at all because he does not give you points.
Very interesting point.
Right? But instead of Virat, maybe I can choose someone like a Rajat Patidar who comes in, smashes 2-3 sixes and then he gives you the same number of points with just limited balls that he plays. He's a better fantasy pick compared to Virat, right? But then, right, so the thing with people is we are too emotionally connected, fans, favorite players, right? So even if Virat fails for 10 matches, the 11th match, we still play a game of hope. We still pick Virat, right? So that is a mistake that is always done. So yeah.
I think you just summed up BCCI in the past 5 years for test matches.
Yeah, unfortunately that's the problem. Yeah.
So, okay, so you're saying statistically you should not play fantasy firstly, but if you do, you should not be emotional. How does, so my second question is, firstly, and if possible, if you could back this by a practical example, could be hypothetical as well. Say there's a match between RCB and KKR. I'm supporting KKR, I have to make a team compromising of both the players. Number one, I should not be emotional. I have to basically have impact players in my team who can create a lot of contribution in a short span of time. That would fetch me more points. Is there any way I could have, perhaps with the help of a data analyst or through data in itself that I could gather myself, gauge which player can create more impact rather than just going by the profile that, Virat Kohli is a safe player, Rajat Patidar could create more impact? Is there a scientific way to determine that?
I mean, a simple way to look at it is, let's take a look at last 5 matches. How many fantasy points did the player actually get? Last 5 matches. Instead of looking at runs. So a lot of people look at runs, right? Now, instead of looking at runs, can you take a look at the fantasy points? You can get it on FanCode, you can get it on cricket.com. There are a lot of fantasy applications nowadays, right? So just take a look at how many points were scored in the last recent 3 or recent 5 matches. That is the first point. Second point is, how many times did the player actually appear in a dream team? So dream team is one where after every match, so Dream 11 gives you a dream team. That means this was a perfect choice for this was the team. If you have built this team, you could get the maximum point. So that is called a dream team. So how many times did he actually appear in a dream team? So that is another metric, right? And then the third one is, you need to keep track of point system, right? So what gives you points? See, ultimately fantasy is all about points, right? So 6 hitters get a lot of points, right? So power play bowlers, they get a lot of points, right? So typically openers, right? So openers, they have the high probability of facing a lot of deliveries. Obviously you want openers in a team, right? People who bowl death overs. So death overs, you get free wickets, right? Because people are trying to hit. But that is a good thing for points, right? For every wicket you are getting 25-30 points, right? So I want to pick players who bowl in the death overs. I want to pick bowlers who play in the power play. You get hit a lot. Sometimes you get wickets as well, but most of the times you don't get wickets, right? So openers tend to have the game, right? So, and then for example, for every pitch or for every venue, there are particular players who perform really well. For example, Azaz Patel, he has a very good record in Wankhede, right? So that's how I think he's the highest wicket taker in a single venue in India. 22 wickets in probably 2-3 matches. That's all, right? So every player has some favorite venue, favorite players. You need to keep track of these patterns, right? So some people perform well on birthdays or anniversaries. So for example, I think David Warner and Rohit Sharma, they perform well on anniversaries and birthdays. So yeah, I think you need to keep track of these patterns as well.
That's a really interesting one of the shocking insights that we have covered in this podcast. अब सोचो अगर एक क्लिप इतनी बढ़िया थी तो पूरा का पूरा पॉडकास्ट कितना बढ़िया होगा।
तो अगर आपको इसी क्लिप का पूरा पॉडकास्ट देखना है तो यहाँ पे क्लिक करिए, और अगर आपको ऐसे ही और क्लिप्स बिंज वॉच करनी है तो यहाँ पे क्लिक करिए।